Well, good morning and welcome to everyone who's here in person. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online. And a special welcome to Jay Stowe. Jay is a parishioner here, and today we're going to be talking about public utilities. I think the sound in the house is a little loud. Is that right? Okay, well, I'm sure it sounds great online. I just want to make sure we're not too filled with echoes in this space. As I said, Jay is a parishioner and the CEO of JEA. He's served as the CEO for the last 2.5 years. And we're going to today be talking about JEA, about public utilities, and we're going to talk about some ethical questions that surround utilities. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, I will. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for being here, both in person and online. I have been here for about 2.5 years, but I've done this utility work really my whole career. Worked in a couple of municipal utilities in North Carolina and spent about 11 or 12 years in Huntsville at Huntsville Utilities in Alabama. A few years at TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, much larger utility, and then been here for about 2.5 years. But really more than even my career, my father and my grandfather also ran utilities in North Carolina, so my whole life I've grown up around utilities. In fact, I learned how to ride my bike at a water plant in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So this is all I've ever known is the utility world.
That really is, it really is fascinating, this longevity in your family of serving in utilities. I'm sure a lot's changed since your father and your grandfather got involved in utilities. Can you highlight some of the major changes over that period of time?
It's interesting because the utility industry is pretty slow at changing. Maybe the church might be slower at changing, but the utility industry has not changed a whole lot for the first 50 or 100 years that electricity has been around. But it has started to change a lot more in the last 10 or 15 years, and I think even that's going to look slow as we move forward. And whether it is work on the water side that the legislature doesn't, they've passed a law that says we can't put any more wastewater in the river, or if it is electrification in your homes, in electric vehicles, batteries, the type of storage that we have. The world has changed and is changing much more quickly now than it ever has. So you're right, it's a lot of changes happening right now.
One of the things that makes JEA somewhat distinctive is that it's a public utility. Can you speak a little bit to the difference between a private utility and a public utility?
Yeah, so JEA is owned by the city of Jacksonville. There's about 2,000 electric systems that are municipal that look a little bit like JEA, but not very many that also have water and wastewater and district interchilled water downtown, and a few other things that we do. The main businesses are water, wastewater, electricity, and there's not very many places that look like JEA in that sense. We're the seventh or eighth largest electric public system in the country, probably the fifth or sixth largest water and wastewater system, public system in the country. All of that together puts us in not a lot of other places to compare to based on the structure that we have. But we are publicly owned, community owned by the city, as opposed to a private system that would be owned by the stockholders, shareholders of the system, and we make decisions based on what is best for the community. I like to think that the larger investor owns do the same thing, but they have the pressure to respond to stockholders and stock price, and we don't have to do that. So everything we do is very focused on the community.
So the mission and the purpose is distinctive because it's a public utility.
It is. In fact, our mission, and it's not just words, the mission should be to provide reliable, resilient power and water, but our actual mission is to improve lives and build community, which is what we do. The core foundation of what we do is to support the community. We talk about the fact that if we do our job well, everyone else can do their jobs well, and you'll know it. If we're not doing our job well, you know it because you don't have clean water, you don't have your lights on, your power. It requires us as a foundational service to the community to be able to work. So our focus is improving lives and building community every day.
So I understand that JEA is a huge organization. I understand JEA owns 3% of the property in Duval County and employs a couple thousand people. Obviously, it has big ramifications on our city and our county because of that. Two of the ethical questions that are interesting to think about from a faith perspective are the question of environmentalism and care for creation, and then the question of affordability, especially utility affordability for those who wouldn't be able or who'd struggle to afford it. How does JEA weigh those two concerns? Are they ever in conflict? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, they are in conflict, and we do have to weigh all of those concerns all the time. There are some people in the environmental community within Jacksonville who get frustrated when I say this, but I keep saying it because I believe that it is true, that JEA is the most important environmental organization in the community. Because without what we do to keep the electric on and clean air, to keep the water treated for public health, public safety, so that we can support economic development, and to keep the wastewater clean as it goes back into the river, without that, then we would not be able to grow. We would not be able to sustain the number of people that we have in the community. So we're very focused on stewardship of the resources, which means that we're focused on environmental type activities. But we're also aware that with the idea that we're foundational to the community also comes the cost to support that. And nothing we do, everything we do comes from our customers. So my guess is, I should check this before we go. How many of you are customers of JEA? See, this is a fun thing. It's also the only organization that I can think of that everywhere I go, I'm always talking to customers, and everybody is a customer. And we not only the customers that actually pay the bill, but there's people that travel through and they use our services, and we hit on those. So everybody is using our services. And it costs money, and it costs more than it used to be able to accomplish the task. So what we try to do is to pay attention to the cost as best we can. And this won't matter to you because it doesn't matter. If your bill was high last month, your bill was high for you. But when you combine the water, the wastewater, electric, to an average customer in Jacksonville, we pay less than the average customer in all of the other large metropolitan areas in Florida. So that's good for me to be able to say that, but it doesn't really matter because what you pay is what you pay. So we understand that there's a balance in that, and we will talk about how we try to manage our cost, but we also have to take care of the environment, and some of the things that we're needing to do in the future are more expensive than they used to be. So we're using significantly less coal than we used to use. It was cheaper to use coal, but it was worse for the environment. So we're having to balance those things every day.
I understand that there's a diverse set of sources of power within JEA, different sorts of power. Can you speak to that and how that impacts affordability?
Sure. So a couple of things. We've just completed an integrated resource plan, which just simply means for us to look at what our generation mix should look like over the next 30 years. We've really focused on the next 7 or 8 years and plan on having cleaner energy as a source in 2030. We've entered into several agreements for solar power. Just last week on Monday, the plant Vogel is a nuclear plant in Georgia that has zero carbon emission, came online, and we are part of we get part of that output. And so in the past, we've had a large coal plant at St. Johns River Power Park, our Northside generation plant, and we are now using more efficient, whether it's natural gas, solar, nuclear energy to be able to support that. So by 2030, we'll have 35% of our energy will come from clean energy. We'll be reducing our carbon output by 80% from 2005 levels. All of those are some more numbers that if you are very focused on the environmental side of things, it's not enough. And if you're focused on the cost side of things, it might be too much. So we're balancing that too, and trying to keep rates as low as feasible.
Obviously, when we think about affordability, we're concerned about affordability for everyone. But when we think about individuals where someone may go through a particular crisis, a loss of a job or something like that, are there resources available?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. And I won't have them all. There's a 211 number with the United Way. The United Way is a big partner. There is Downtown Ecumenical Services, the Catholic Charities. We have a program that you can add to your bill, extra dollars that goes to a neighbor-to-neighbor program that we call it, that helps people with bills. And there's a lot of other kind of places that you can go to help do that. And we have a team of people that are coordinating that within JEA. We also are very focused on the cost. So the best thing that we can do is keep our cost as low as possible. We've made some changes in the last couple of years where we have made it less difficult to get credit, so you're not having to put a deposit down. We have a program, a prepay electric program, where you don't have to put a deposit, and you can prepay your electric bill or your utility bill without a deposit. We've eliminated credit card fees. So we take steps as many times as we can to make it easier to do business with us and make it less expensive. And we have relationships with the community for people who have the resources to help those that don't.
So that's the affordability, the cost side. On the environmental and creation care side, there are obviously regulations in place that provide some guardrails. Beyond those regulations, what has JEA done to try to be a good neighbor?
Well, so the first thing is to follow the regulations. So we follow the regulations and actually exceed them in most areas. So the river is cleaner because we have exceeded the I said that we don't exceed limits. We beat the limits. We've done better. We've done better than the regulations suggest. And then we look long term with what might get better. So every time there is a new administration at the federal level, at the local level, at the state level, the rules change. And there are some organizations that look like JEA that sometimes will bounce back and forth with those rules. What we have understood is that regardless of who is in any given 4-year cycle, if we look backwards 50 years, environmental regulations have gotten more stringent, not less, even though they've been up and down along the way. And so we know that they're going to be more stringent 20 and 30 years from now. And so we ignore the static of the up and down, and we try to look longer term so that we could be better. Now, that hasn't always been the case at JEA. Some of you will know that we had last year less than 2% of our energy came from solar. It's way too small. We were leaders in that in 2002. We were leaders, and then we stopped, and we didn't do as much as we needed to do with solar. A lot of reasons for that. That's a different talk. But we didn't do as much. Now we've got significantly more in place, and by 2030 we'll have 25% of our energy coming from solar, about 25%. So we make progress because we're looking longer term than we may have looked in the past.
As we mentioned at the beginning, you've been at JEA for 2.5 years. Obviously, you stepped into an organization with a complex history. Can you speak a little bit to what strong and ethical leadership looks like, and how you've demonstrated that or inspired confidence in others?
I can try. JEA went through an interesting time right before I got here, which might be an understatement. And I won't talk a whole lot about that, but if you want to go look it up on the newspaper, you can see the challenges that went through. And I think it is a sign of when decisions are being made that are short-term, that it causes trouble. We're in a business that doesn't change very fast and doesn't change very much. But if you don't pay attention to doing the right thing to serve the customers, if you lose track of the idea that you are you're trying to improve lives and build community, then you may come off the rails a little bit. And so part of what my job when I got here was with the rest of the leadership team at JEA, was to stabilize both internally and externally, to rebuild trust in the community. And because trust had been eroded at JEA, both internally and with the community. And so our primary focus was, let's make the right decision. Let's support the community, support our employees, and I think we've done okay at that.
With such a large organization, as I said, over 2,000 employees and serving hundreds of thousands of customers, obviously change can be complicated, and inspiring that confidence, is there anything that you think has meaningfully helped build up that trust and that confidence in the past couple of years?
I think it's consistency of message. So we talk about every organization has a list of values, and sometimes it's just the things that are on the page. But we're focused on safety, respect, and integrity, and we remind our employees of that, and all the team of that every time we meet. I write an email every Friday. I write an email to all employees. That is the only thing that doesn't get edited by communications and others. So it goes with lots of typos and grammatical errors, but it reminds people that our most important thing really is to treat each other with courtesy and respect. Because if we can treat each other well, it makes it easier for us to then treat our customers well. And if we're treating our customers well, it's a little bit harder for them to not treat us well. And so it starts us off in a little bit of a better place. And if we can start there, then the other things become a little bit easier. We're going to make good decisions, and good decisions mean related to environment. It's related to how we treat our employees, how we treat the community, and then everything gets better. So we just stay consistent with that message. And sometimes it gets boring, because every single time I talk to employees, we talk about courtesy and respect. And we used to have safety messages at beginning of every single meeting. Like at this meeting, we would have started and said, if you need to exit, you go this way and you go this way. And now we start every meeting with a values moment, that sometimes it's about safety, but sometimes it's about integrity, and sometimes it's about respect. And it's becoming more and more built into the foundation. This is a slower method, so we could have come in with a command and control and told people what to do. And if I wanted to just be here for 3 years, that would have worked great. But I want to be here long term, and the organization needs to be here stable long term.
You said that it feels like you say the same thing, you reiterate the same values regularly. Yeah. That's what we do here also, yeah. If you all haven't noticed. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. You know what we're going to tell you next week? Love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But I think that repetition is a really good insight as to a key to good leadership. It is interesting, you said that utilities seem to move very slow sometimes, but at least right now it seems like there's a lot in the news and a lot going on around the world. I kind of just this week, PG&E out in California changed how they were approaching a big power and fire crisis they had a few years ago. Obviously, we have this explosive growth in electric vehicles, which will probably put increased demand on the electric grid. What are the changes that you foresee in the coming years? Because, as I said, it seems like changes are coming.
We don't like to use explosive in the sentences, but the changes. So the beauty of being in Florida and in Jacksonville is that the economic development and the economic growth is it's unbelievable, really. We are growing so fast, and we have some challenges with that growth. So some of the challenges are, and I don't want to get down into the weeds too much, but in order for you to get electricity at your house, you have to have a transformer It's either on a pole if you're overhead, or it's a green box outside your house if you're underground. Every new subdivision needs that. And we used to get those in 6 weeks, and it went to 72 weeks, and the supply chain to be able to get that has caused us a lot of problems. Bigger problem right now is if you're, I should have asked all this before I started because some of you might be mad at us, but if you're developing a commercial property, the large three-phase transformers are taking even longer to get, and that is going to cause big problems. Because at the same time, we're starting to see growth. Interesting to me, but since 2008 till now, we've had no growth in the amount of electricity we sell. It's been flat. Now, a lot more customers, but it's been flat because we have LED lights, much more efficient refrigerators and HVAC and cooling systems, so it's been flat. That won't stay that way for the next 5 or 6 or 8, 10 years because all the LED lights have changed. We're as efficient as we can be on a bunch of these things, and electric vehicles and electrification is going to come. That will put more pressure on us to be able to supply the infrastructure that we need to supply to the community, and we've got to keep on keeping up with it.
So just to reiterate, four major points that I've heard you speak about, which are enlightening to us. First of all, you talked about kind of the environmental awareness. Second of all, you've talked about the question of affordability. Third of all, I've heard you talk about the importance of good leadership. And there was a fourth, which I've somehow lost. I told Jay this morning that my mind was going to go blank at some point. Is there a fourth major point you want to add to what I just said there?
I was impressed that I had 3.
Well, are there any concluding thoughts that you want to? Oh, the fourth was, I really appreciate the insight about public utilities being focused on the community and focused on responsibility to those around us. I think that's a beautiful model. Do you have any concluding thoughts before we open this up to questions from the group?
No, question seems like a good concluding thought. This happens a lot. A lot of questions.
That means I didn't ask good questions along the way.
I just like to share an observation for my wife and I about JEA and community involvement. We send our children to public schools in Jacksonville, and JEA was a major sponsor of the robotics program at their local high school. And I mean, not just giving money, but my children had interaction with engineers. You guys have a whole army of very technical people. Two of them even had letters of recommendation written to their colleges. It was a hugely impactful. 3 of our kids went on to become engineers, and it was really, I think, validates the observations about public versus private utilities. It's really hugely important to our community. Did you want to say something else?
But let me say thank you. I tend to talk about the technical side of things, the organizational kind of thing, but one big part of improving lives and building community is involvement in the community. And so even today, I didn't know if I was coming to work or to church today, so I wore my logo. That's the work part, but no talking points. And so I think but I appreciate that because we want to be involved in schools, and we're involved in a lot of different schools, and we have co-op programs and a lot of things like that. So thank you.
Okay, I was going to ask about the solar energy. Your projections for, you said you're going to increase solar. Is it mostly coming from these solar farms that we see along the highway, or how important is the part that individual homes play with their solar? Because maybe recently the incentives got cut back for that or something.
So most of what I'm talking about is the large-scale solar projects that you see. We're working to try to update what our solar policy should be for customers, businesses, and homeowners. It's still very expensive. Yeah, you have to be pretty well-to-do to be able to afford solar on your house. It's still less expensive to buy that from us. But right now, we have the way we buy that electricity back is based on how much fuel costs we save, and we're revisiting how much that should be. What is the right level? There are some that say it should be full retail. That's too high. It's too high. And there's some utility people that say it should be zero, and that's too low. So the answer is somewhere in between zero and full retail. But you still have to use the lines and the electricity that's coming to your house until batteries get to a point that your solar and your battery will just serve you off grid and you don't need to be connected to us. As long as you're connected to JEA, if you're not paying something to us, then everyone else is subsidizing that, and we have to balance that.
Well, first, thank you, Jay, for your service at JEA. The community and everyone really appreciates what you're doing for us. And thank you for mentioning the transformer supply chain issue in your earlier remarks. And it's no surprise, I'm going to ask the same question I always ask when I see you. The neighborhood undergrounding initiative is on the books, as part of our ordinance. There's a number of neighborhoods that really would like to see their overhead power lines undergrounded. When will JEA turn that program back on?
So when we had the way the overhead to underground works is 70% of the people in the neighborhood have to agree to have that put to move from overhead to underground and then pay for it to be done. When the supply chain for transformers got so bad, we paused that project because our first priority is to keep the people that have electricity now with electricity. Our second priority is to allow for the new growth in the system, and then our third priority is to change over from overhead to underground. And as soon as we can get a better handle on our supply chain, which has not happened yet, we still have very long delays. I'm on a couple of different national committees trying to work through. This is not a JEA problem. It's not something that we did or didn't do. It's a national problem right now, and as soon as we can get a better handle on where that's going to land, and it may be next year, maybe the next year, I don't have a timeline yet because we can't afford to use transformers that we need in case there's a storm to move somebody from overhead to underground, and then we have a storm and we don't have a transformer to put in place. So we're trying to balance all of that. So keep on working on it.
Okay, if I can follow up. If it's a 52-week wait for the current transformers, can't we just increase our orders and we'll wait 52 weeks? And instead of ordering 100, order 150? And it's been 3 years, so the neighborhoods are getting a little antsy about wanting to go forward.
Yeah. No, we can't. The problem is every time we increase our order, it stretches out the lead time, and every utility across the country is doing that. So it's not as straight a line. We have increased our orders, and then it gets longer, and so we increase and then it gets longer, and so it's the problem. The problem is it's not static. It really did used to be a 6-week easy move it. So it's gotten very complicated, and there's other. That's the transformers are a proxy for lots of other supply chain problems. We have be sure we get enough fire hydrants and be sure we get enough switch gear and a lot of other wood poles, a lot of other components.
Jay, thank you for being here and for all of your good work. I have heard, but I don't know that it is true, that if all of the neighborhood goes to electric cars, it will take a massive amount of infrastructure investment by JEA. Is that true?
It may be. We are trying to prepare for that. There's a couple of different pieces of it. One is that if you buy an electric vehicle, not a big problem because the transformer still can handle that. But if you buy one and your neighbor buys one, and if the transformer serves 4 houses and all of you buy one, and then you really like it, and so your second car you buy another one, and all those are trying to work, then there's a possibility that the transformer itself would need to be upgraded. And then there's a possibility the substation needs to be upgraded, and then there's a possibility that we have to have more generation. Right now, if that were to happen, it would be a combination of JEA and the customer having to pay for that. There's rules across the country right now that suggesting that individuals shouldn't have to pay for that upgrade, which is a little bit like the solar. If individuals don't pay for that upgrade, then everybody else is going to pay for that upgrade. It's one of our concerns is that it's going to require significant upgrades and significant investment going forward. But the good news is that even though it's coming fast, not a lot of electric vehicles out there right now on the scale of what we're talking about, and I don't think it's going to go just in one day over the next 10 or 15 years, and so I think we can be thoughtful about it and be okay.
Thank you for being here also, Jay. I have a totally different line of questioning. It's on the economic side. Do we sell our power to other communities to make money for JEA?
We have the ability to sell, but right now we are probably a net buyer. We get more off system, but we have the ability to sell and have projects and on a daily basis, an hourly basis, every once in a while we'll sell off system, but by and large we're buying electricity or producing it ourselves.
I was thinking about the Neighbor to Neighbor Fund. So you said that there are a group of people that have that pool of money and they give it out individually, or does it go flat across to people who can't pay their bills? Or
I believe the Neighbor to Neighbor program is tied with Catholic Charities. And then United Way has a program, and then the downtown. So there's a bunch of different places that you can do that. And then what happens is that if you need assistance, then you call or contact the different agencies, and they will do an interview and check. There's rules about how often you can use it and how much you can use, and I don't know what those rules are.
Oh, okay. And I was just thinking that probably for 35 years, we're still giving the same amount, a couple dollars or something you said, so I would...
There is no limit to what you can give. Feel free.
I need to go online and figure out...
It is online,
how to
yes.
increase it. Thank you.
George, did you have a question? I saw your hand up earlier. Okay.
Is the supply chain problem a China problem?
Not directly. We don't get any equipment directly from China, but it's a worldwide problem and issue right now, and part of the problem is the steel that we use, how much of it can be produced in the U.S. and how much of it is being produced outside the U.S. There are laws in place that limit the amount of materials that we can get from China and from North Korea and a few other places. But the supply chain issue, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I would have never imagined even talking about a worldwide issue. Last year, your bills skyrocketed because fuel was expensive. And that was sort of a supply chain issue because when Russia invaded Ukraine, then Europe didn't get natural gas from Russia. And so we started shipping natural gas to Europe in liquefied natural gas, which meant that we didn't have as much natural gas for us to use, and the prices went up. So not directly China, but world supply chain issues are impacting us like I would have never expected just a few years ago. Everything got more complicated.
If we don't have any more questions, before we wrap up, I want to make one quick comment. I told Jay this morning that I made an intentional decision when I got up today. I wore socks that I bought at the bookstore that go to where some of the profits go to benefit those who wouldn't have clean drinking water. And I did this in honor of JEA, and it turns out Jay was wearing the same socks. So if you want to buy socks that provide clean drinking water to those who would go without, these are available over at the bookstore. And thank you to Jay for modeling them.
Yes, thank you very much.
Can we close in prayer? The Lord be with you. Dear God, we thank you for all those who serve our community. We thank you for the employees of JEA, for those who give us clean drinking water, for those who give us electricity and power. We pray that you help us always be mindful that we use our resources rightly, that we care for those who are impoverished, that we strengthen our community, and that we engender trust. We thank you for Jay's leadership at JEA and pray you continue to work in each of our lives to care for our neighbors. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Thank you very much.